Smallville is a show that will always have a place in my heart. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. I've watched it all the way through too many times to count, and I never get tired of it. This show paved the way for future DC shows, so without this, we would have never gotten Gotham, or the Arrowverse with Arrow, Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, Supergirl, and many more on the way. The series was groundbreaking for its time, and inspired many shows to be created, shows that I watch on a weekly basis today. Smallville has 217 episodes, so it was definitely hard to narrow it down to just 10, but I think I have a pretty solid list. Now there will be some spoilers for the entire series, so here's your warning, spoiler alert. For this list, we're starting things off right with Hourglass from Season 1. This, in my opinion, was the best episode of Season 1. This is the episode that made me say, wow, this show has some incredible writing and a great future ahead of it. It was only the 6th episode ever released of the series. The episode has two main plot points. We follow two elderly people that Clark, Lana, and Pete meet while volunteering at a nursing home. There is Cassandra, a blind old lady who can see the future because of the meteor shower.
Then the meteors came. One hit a field behind my house. Flash burnt my optic nerves.
Then we follow an old man named Harry, who in his past murdered people who destroyed his dreams of becoming a piano player. Harry falls into a lake filled with meteor rocks, which makes him become a teenager again, and he goes after the children of the jurors that convicted him.
Fate's giving you a second chance, Harry boy. And this time, we're gonna pay.
Cassandra's part in the episode is that she sees Clark's future and tells him that someone close to him is going to die. Clark then worries the whole episode, telling his friends and family to be more careful. Those two things are enough to make a great episode, but as interesting as both of those are, the thing that sets this episode apart from other episodes is the fact that it dives into the main characters. It explores mainly Clark, Lex, and Lana. For Clark, it gives us a glimpse of the hero he will become.
More than once I've touched people and I've seen such pain and despair. But then you were there, and I think that's your destiny, Clark. To help people, to save them from fear and darkness.
But it goes beyond that and explores his future many years after he becomes the hero he's destined to be. It explores the character's immortality and what his ultimate future will be, many years after the time that we're so familiar with in the comics.
And you saw an endless graveyard. Like I was the last person on Earth.
This explores something deeper about Superman that not many people think about.
What if it is my destiny to outlive everyone that I love? I don't want to be alone.
This is something that has been somewhat explored in the comics, but not too much, and I just thought it was a really interesting concept and look into Clark's future. The character development we get for Lex is interesting because we see him dwell on the past about the day Clark saved him in the pilot.
I had a team go over this thing inch by inch. They tell me there's no way the impact could have ripped open the roof like this.
They must have made a mistake.
It also develops Clark and Lex's relationship, which is one of my favorite parts of the series. The character development we get for Lana is again something that we saw take place in the pilot, when her parents died in the meteor shower.
Remember when you said people keep their darkest secrets hidden? Mine's out there for all the world to see.
I love her character, and I think they did a great job bringing up her past, and I find it interesting how her past follows her everywhere she goes.
Maybe I should just accept my destiny. All I'm ever gonna be is a little girl in a fairy princess costume who lost her parents.
The ending scene is by far the best part of the episode, diving even more into Lex's character, when he visits Cassandra and she sees the terrible things that he's going to do. We see him as president, which happened in the comics, and we get to see really interesting imagery that describes the horrors that he will commit in the future, without actually showing us what he does, leaving it somewhat of a mystery. The vision of these horrors actually kills Cassandra before she can tell Lex his fate, and Michael Rosenbaum's performance as Lex Luthor and his reaction to Cassandra dying was phenomenal. The final scene is topped off with a great line that shows Cassandra's prediction about Clark's future is correct.
I'm sorry, son. She's gone.
She saw it.
So what?
Her future.
Coming in at number 9 is Pandora from Season 9. This was the mid-season finale, and it delivered big time. The whole season had been leading up to this, after Lois disappeared for 3 weeks, and no one knew where she went, until we find out she went to the future, because of a Legion ring she found. The main villain of the season, General Zod, who in my opinion was one of the strongest seasonal villains, had taken over the world with the help of Tess Mercer, who helped him create a building in Metropolis, which he used to turn the yellow sun into a red sun, making Zod and his army from the planet Pandora have powers and take Clark's away. What Lois comes to is an apocalyptic future where she's been gone for a year because of the fact that she time traveled here. It really explores Clark's character, with him having the weight of the world on his shoulders, and one wrong decision he makes could lead to all hell breaking loose.
I made all the wrong choices. A lot of people died.
We find out that when Lois went missing, Clark went rogue, leaving Chloe and Oliver, which leads to a lot of great dialogue.
Why should I trust you now? You already left us once to fight on your own.
You abandoned us, big guy, plain and simple.
I thought I could stop Zod myself. But I'm here now.
It really explores Clark's attachment to Lois and how she really is his weakness.
Lois, I died when you left.
Saving her takes priority over everything, and it's been explored many times in the comics and other media, so I thought it was great that they incorporated that in this episode. We get some great acting in this episode from everyone, which is especially prevalent in the death scenes that take place in the future. We see Chloe die, and Erica Durance's performance as Lois is fabulous, and the same goes for Justin Hartley as Oliver when Tess dies. Both were incredibly powerful and gut-wrenching scenes. Ultimately, the episode sets up the rest of the season when they realize that the only way to save the world is to send Lois back.
The best way to avenge her death is to get that ring. You can save her. You make sure this future never happens and you'll save all of us.
The episode has some great things going for it during the present, including Lois and Clark finally getting together, which we've been waiting for since Lois was introduced to the show in season 4.
I have done this dating thing wrong so many times.
Then let's do it right.
And finally, the final scene of the episode is awesome.
Kneel before Kal-El.
Number 8 is Lexmas from season 5. This episode is huge in Lex's character development and is handled in such a creative and original way. We all know what Lex is destined to become, Superman's arch rival. But in this show, we've mostly seen the good, friendly side of Lex, who's best friends with Clark. The show handles his character so well because all of that backstory makes his fall even more tragic, and that's especially prevalent in this episode. Lex gets shot and sees visions when his mom, who died years ago, visits him, and she shows him the life that he could have if he makes the right decisions.
All of this can be yours if you make the right choices.
We see his perfect life when he's married to Lana and has a family with her. He's still best friends with Clark, his manipulative, evil father is out of the way, and he no longer relies on his money. And Jonathan Kent finally accepts him.
I couldn't be prouder of you if you were my own son.
We see Lex so happy, and it makes us as an audience happy too, because after all the tragedy in his life, he makes it here.
I can't remember ever being this happy.
Unfortunately, everything takes a turn for the worse, and we see that if he makes this life a reality, Lana will die giving birth to their child, and there's nothing he can do to stop it.
You can save her.
Don't you understand that every decision you've made has brought you to this very moment? You gave up the money and the power that would have enabled you to save your wife.
In her last words, Lana tells him not to change.
You're a good man. Don't ever change.
This episode shows a crossroads in his life. Does he choose love and happiness if it means he's powerless to control things in his life? Or does he choose the money and the power?
Follow your heart, not your ambition.
It's truly a huge crossroad in his life, and makes his character even more tragic.
I thought you were showing me a better life.
There was, Lex. A life full of love.
Love. Everyone I've ever loved has died, and I couldn't do anything to stop it.
Ultimately, he chooses to forget love and goes for the power, a trait we see with the Lex Luthor in the comics, who went to any length to stop Superman and get into office. This Lex has everything backwards, thinking that happiness doesn't come from attachments, but rather from the power you possess.
And do you know what the secret to living happily ever after is? Power. Money and power.
The final shot shows Lex looking out a window with the ghost of his mother standing next to him, and as the camera pans out, his mother fades away, along with the Lex we knew for the past 5 seasons, forever changing his character for the seasons to come because of the crossroads in this episode. Number 7, Reckoning from season 5. Now, I know a lot of people have problems with this episode because it fakes you out so much, but I think that's one of the things that makes it so great. There is so much emotion in this episode, and we get some of the best performances out of the series, especially from Tom Welling. This episode is very similar to Lexmas, the episode I just discussed, but instead of Lex's crossroad, this time it's Clark's. The episode starts out incredibly happy and shows Clark's perfect life. He finally tells Lana his secret. They get engaged, Jonathan beats Lex and becomes senator, but just like in Lexmas, everything takes a turn for the worse when Lana visits Lex and he finds out about their engagement and freaks out. Then he chases her down the side of the road, and Lana gets hit by a bus. Clark comes, and Tom Welling gives an incredible performance.
There's nothing you could have done. Nothing.
Again, this parallels Lex's crossroad when their perfect life gets flipped upside down when Lana dies, which is very interesting in my opinion that the people that are destined to be enemies have the same defining moment to change them forever. Clark goes to Jor-El and begs him to give him the power to go back and fix it, and Jor-El accepts, saying it will be a good trial, but warns Clark that the universe will find a balance and take another life. Clark goes back and doesn't tell Lana his secret this time around, ultimately ending their relationship, the most important thing to him, and this actually pushes Lana into Lex's arms. Clark saves her from getting hit by the bus, and she doesn't even know it. Then Lois almost dies, but he saves her in time. And we as an audience are thinking, okay, we're good. He stopped the universe from balancing. But then the worst thing that could happen does. Clark's father collapses and dies from a heart attack, which shows off another incredibly emotional scene.
Dad!
This, of course, is a defining moment in Clark's life in every incarnation of the character, and is part of what made Clark the man he is destined to become.
I just don't know how I'm supposed to be the man he wanted me to be without him here.
Whether your father is here with us or not, you're a man he's proud of, a man he could look up to. And something tells me he won't be the only one.
The thing that Smallville's version of Jonathan's death does so great is that it's much more Clark's fault than in the other incarnations of the character. This is because at the end of season 2, he runs off when he's poisoned by red kryptonite, which makes his morals disappear. Jonathan goes after him with powers that Jor-El gave him, which destroys his heart, hence the heart attack that killed him. That, on top of Clark going back in time and changing fate, it haunts Clark for the entirety of the series, and it's a reoccurring point over the next 5 seasons. The final scene is done so beautifully. There's no dialogue at all, it's just all visuals, and it tells so much without saying a word. It shows Lex watching Lana and Clark from afar, and it shows Chloe, Lois, and Lana looking up to Clark to see if he's okay, and Clark just keeps looking forward. His eyes are unmoving, just looking at his father's casket. It tells so much about what Clark's feeling and his struggle without saying a word. It's one of my favorite scenes of the series. Number 6, Labyrinth from season 6. This episode had a really interesting concept. Clark gets taken over by a demon from the Phantom Zone and wakes up in an alternate reality where he had a psychotic break and is suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, and everything he knew to be true was made up in his head.
You invented a make-believe world to help you deal with the trauma you endured. You convinced yourself that you came from another planet, that you possessed special powers.
The episode is extremely convincing, even to the audience, that this world is real. And the first time I watched it, for a second, I actually believed it. Lex is in a wheelchair and has no legs because the accident he caused, which of course is different from reality, where Clark actually saved him.
I was there.
And you caused the accident. Oh, you claimed you saw my car swerving out of control, so you jumped in front of it to save me with your superpowers.
The way his mother Martha reacts to him being crazy is so convincing as well, and she's married to Lionel Luthor, who gave him the help he needed. The most convincing part, though, was the names of things and people he knew to be true that surrounded him.
You've taken bits and pieces of your surroundings and created an alternate universe where you feel safe and secure.
This story was actually in the comics, but it was also done in the animated Justice League series, which is pretty cool that Smallville did their own take on it. And it's not the same story rehash because Smallville takes its own universe and makes its own version of it. This episode also explores Clark's relationship with Lana and Chloe. Chloe was also in the nightmare, and she too was crazy, but she was trying to help Clark.
You were the one person who believed in me.
Their friendship is one of the best parts of the series, and it's expanded on very well here.
I don't know what I'd do without you, Chloe. You mean a lot more to me than you know.
It also explores how Lana is Clark's weakness.
I almost gave up everything and everyone that I care about for Lana.
I guess kryptonite's not your only weakness.
This episode is also the introduction to J'onn J'onzz, otherwise known as Martian Manhunter, who is a member of the Justice League.
Welcome home, Kal-El.
The episode's premise is so interesting, and that's what set it above many of the other episodes in my opinion. Coming in at number 5 is Absolute Justice from season 9. If you're a DC fan, you'll love this episode. There's so many Easter eggs and cameos, it's crazy, and honestly too many to count. This 2-part episode was their second shot at a Justice League-like episode, because we all know that their first shot unfortunately didn't really live up to expectations back in season 6. This episode deals with a lot more than just the Justice League though. It also deals with the Justice Society of America, or the JSA. Now, in the comics, the JSA was the first ever superhero team, and it was made all the way back in the 1940s, only a decade after the superhero genre was invented. So this was way before the Justice League in what is known as the Golden Age of comics. The Justice League is known in what is called the Silver Age of comics, which they actually make reference to in this episode.
It will be a different age than ours, Clark. A silver age of heroism.
In the comics, it gets super complicated, with multiple Earths, then the multiple Earths forming as one and making them all intertwined, but let's just keep it simple. There's the Golden Age team from the 1940s, the JSA, and the Silver Age team from the 1960s, the JLA. There are alternate versions of many of the heroes with alternate origin stories, but essentially with the same powers. The most well-known probably being the Golden Age Flash, Jay Garrick, who actually makes a small appearance in this episode along with his signature helmet. And then there's the Silver Age Flash, Barry Allen. So obviously this episode took on a big task of combining the two teams and making it adapt to the world that they had created for the show. And they did a pretty damn good job at it. The JLA, of course, isn't formed yet, but in this episode we see the stepping stones to it being built, which was pretty awesome.
So what do you call your team anyway?
A work in progress.
They mention pretty much every member of the JSA and give them a nice backstory for each character. But the main JSA members who appear in this episode that actually have a significant part in the plot include Hawkman, their leader, Dr. Fate, Stargirl, Star-Spangled Kid, and the Sandman. Star-Spangled Kid and Sandman are killed by Icicle, another DC character from the comics, and he's picking the JSA off one by one. Eventually, the Smallville team we know that consists of Clark as the Blur, Oliver as the Green Arrow, John Jones as Martian Manhunter, and Chloe as Watchtower. They go head to head with the JSA, which in itself is pretty cool. I especially like the relationship between Carter Hall as Hawkman and Oliver. Carter actually throws Oliver through the Watchtower window. Also, some of their dialogue is hilarious.
The winged warrior here threw me through a window.
I hope I didn't make you cry.
Eventually they warm up to each other and actually become friendly. Their relationship was one of the best parts of the episode in my opinion.
You don't want anyone to know how important they are to you, so you act like a jackass.
This episode is also the first to my knowledge to touch on Dr. Fate in live action, which was really interesting.
I wish I could remember what my life was like before Dr. Fate.
They also mentioned both Injustice, a big part of the DC comics, along with the Suicide Squad.
Welcome to the Suicide Squad.
And if all of that wasn't enough for a kick-ass episode, it also expands on Clark's ultimate future and destiny to become Superman, and how Lois plays a part in that.
You are the one he will need. He is the one you will need.
There's so much more too. I've barely scratched the surface with Easter eggs and comic references. The episode is really a treasure chest full of them that any DC fan would appreciate. Number 4, it's gotta be Shattered, the mid-season finale from season 3. This is yet another Lex episode, and it gives him so much development. The premise is that Lex finds out his father murdered his grandparents for the insurance money when he was just a kid, which in itself is a great backstory for Lionel, who was of course created solely for this show. Lex thinks, and we as an audience do as well, that someone tries to kill him in his mansion, and the guy actually kills his bodyguard in the process. Lex escapes by jumping out a window and goes to Clark. Slowly we start to see that Lex is actually going crazy.
He's hearing voices, he sees things that aren't there.
Lex believes that the whole thing is a conspiracy, and they're drugging him to make him think he's going crazy.
It's a perfect plan, Clark. As long as the world thinks I'm crazy, no one will believe what I found out about my father in Morgan Edge.
But slowly more and more happens that makes you think he's actually going crazy. His bodyguard isn't dead. There's no mess to indicate that someone tried to kill him in the mansion, and many more small things. Then we see him start singing to a blanket that he believes is his little brother Julian, who died when he was a kid.
I had to get the baby, he was crying.
The episode is great because it slowly makes Lex think he might actually be going crazy, and we as an audience feel the same way he does, because the whole time we're from his point of view. So just like him, we're not sure what's real and what isn't.
Maybe I'm crazy, Clark. I honestly don't know anymore.
This episode is also great because it shows the strength of Lex and Clark's friendship.
Lex, I've got your back. That's why I'm here.
And even when all the odds are stacked against him, Clark still has Lex's back.
You're either with me or against me, Clark. Choose right now. Clark.
We really see how Clark struggles with figuring out what the right thing to do is. This episode also has some real ramifications for the rest of the season, when Lana actually gets hurt pretty badly while watching Lex, and she'll ultimately have to be in rehab for the rest of the season, and it will change the way that she feels about Clark. Michael Rosenbaum gives a phenomenal performance as always.
When people think you're insane and you're holding a rifle to their head, they tend to do what you ask.
In my opinion, he is by far the best actor on this show, and he continuously gives phenomenal performances, and this is one of his best ones.
Are you seeing Julian again?
No, I can't take him when he cries, Dad.
The end of the episode leaves you wanting so much more, which is what every good episode will do, especially a mid-season finale. Number 3, Nemesis from Season 6. Another one that focuses on Clark and Lex's relationship. Clearly you can tell that's one of my favorite parts of the series. At this point in the series, their friendship is pretty much over. Lex stole Lana from Clark and married her. Lex knows that Clark is hiding something from him and resents him for it.
You've been hiding secrets from me since we met. You never trusted me.
They've had a few physical confrontations, so it's safe to say it would take a lot to put their friendship back together, and this episode is probably the closest it gets to that. The plot of the episode revolves around Lex being trapped in a never-ending tunnel underneath Smallville. It's going to detonate in 20 minutes, and Lionel begs Clark to go save him because he's the only one that can. The only thing is that when Clark goes down there, he realizes it's full of meteor rocks, so he doesn't have his powers, and they have to work together to get out alive. It's been a long time since we've seen these two get along, so it was great to see some of that. They save each other a few times and really work well together. Some of their back and forths are really interesting.
I stopped expecting you to act like a friend a long time ago. Were we ever really friends, Lex? I don't know. I have nothing to compare it to.
It really brings up some things that were never fully let out between the two.
Did you even try to see my humanity before you decided I had none? I did, Lex. And look where we are.
There's one great scene where Clark gets trapped under a bunch of rubble.
Don't leave me here.
You think that Lex left him to die, and later we actually see that he's not completely evil yet.
Do you really think I was gonna let you die alone down here, Clark? I guess you never knew me at all.
At the end of the episode, Clark even makes reference to their fallen friendship.
I saw a glimpse of something I hadn't seen in years. My friend.
This episode is also a great one for Lana. Lana, of course, was the sweet, innocent girl next door until she got involved with Lex, and we see just how much he's influenced her in this episode. First, she threatens Lionel, pushes down on his IV, and cuts off his oxygen.
If I killed you right now, I'd be free. Give me one reason why I shouldn't.
Then we find out that she had a map to the tunnels the whole time, and didn't reveal them until she found out that Clark was down there too.
Lana was gonna let Lex die down there.
And at the end of the episode, we see her lie like a pro to Lex, making up a story about how disappointed she was that she lost their baby, which of course was all a lie because she knew Lex faked the pregnancy.
Well, I see you've embraced wholeheartedly what it means to be a loser.
In the scene after they escape the tunnel, there is so much going on, but once again it's a dialogue-free scene. Lana immediately runs to Clark, and they get really close. He puts her hand on his heart, then she realizes that her revenge of Lex is more important than her relationship with Clark, and walks away, her hand gliding over his heart as she walks to Lex. She then hugs Lex, and Lex looks right back at Clark, and smirks in a bragging way, showing that his brief redemption in the tunnels wasn't permanent, and his dark side is still thriving inside him. Number 2. Homecoming. This episode brought back a lot of nostalgia, having throwbacks to older episodes and even throwbacks to the very first episode. Clark goes to his high school reunion with Lois, and right off the bat we see a flashback to the first scene ever shot at that school from the very first episode. Then we get a flashback to the Wall of Weird and the torch. We also see Lana's name tag, and we see how being there is affecting Clark. This episode is about Clark and his development and ultimately his destiny to become Superman. The episode does sort of a Christmas Carol-like plot, with Clark visiting the past, present, and future with the help of Brainiac, and it was great to see him again too. To start this episode, Clark is thinking about ending the Blur permanently and giving up his superhero alter ego.
Seems like he's gone away, and I'm not so sure he'll be back.
This episode explores Clark's resentment toward himself and his regrets that he had in the past, along with his fear of the future.
The darkness is the past, and you hold on to it. You dwell. You punish yourself and everyone around you for past mistakes.
First place they go to is his father's funeral, which, as I said earlier, was one of the things that made Clark who he is today.
Because this was a defining moment for you. Perhaps the defining moment.
The day you started to blame yourself.
Brainiac then takes him to the present by showing him Oliver, who just recently outed himself as the Green Arrow to the public. And we see how he's depressed, upset, lonely, and just overall not okay. And we see how much Clark means to him.
I'm sorry, sir. Mr. Kent hasn't left word.
He's always so Oliver, I didn't know that he needed me.
We also see Lois in the present and see how Clark trying to protect her so that the same thing that happened to Lana wouldn't happen to her.
Interesting outcome. Lois doesn't seem especially protected.
Then finally, he goes to the future, which is the best part of the episode. He sees the man he will become, Superman. He also sees that Lois is the person that he can trust above anybody.
Protecting my secret.
What else was I gonna do?
This is something he hasn't done in the present. He's kept everything from her. Lois is one of the things that makes Clark Superman in every incarnation of the hero. And Clark finally realizes that here. Seeing this finally gives Clark the push to tell Lois who he is in the next episode, which is great and opens the door for so many more plot lines and starts to bring the series to a close. When they're dancing in the barn, he finally tells Lois how he feels.
I love you.
I love you too.
Then, as they dance, Clark starts to fly, his way of putting his foot up and showing that Lois is the one for him. The best part for me, though, was seeing future Clark talk to young Clark.
Right on time. You knew I'd be here. Time travel. Think it through.
We also get a great speech from Oliver when he finally gets the encouragement he needs from his best friend.
In this world of armchair bloggers who've created a generation of critics instead of leaders, I'm actually doing something. Right here. Right now, for the city, for my country. You're damn right I'm a hero.
Then he hints at the Justice League.
And I'm not doing it alone.
The episode is great because it develops Clark's character so much and is one of the prime things that forms his future. And number 1, the series finale. This was probably pretty predictable because it's what the whole series led up to. He finally dons the mantle of Superman. This hour and 20-minute special ties up all loose ends and gives fans a fulfilling finish to the 10-year series. Right off the bat, you hear Tom Welling's voice say,
"And now the series finale of Smallville."
And I get chills every time I hear that. The main villain Darkseid and his planet Apocalypse is threatening to take over Earth and infect everyone with the darkness. It's Clark's biggest challenge and his final trial before he can become Superman. There's so many great moments in this episode, I don't even know where to start. The Kent family is finally brought back together, and we get a pretty nostalgic moment because we haven't seen them together since season 5 after Clark's dad died.
You were the miracle we prayed for. Now the world needs that same miracle.
We see how much Clark and Lois mean to each other, and finally see them tie the knot. Well, almost. They get interrupted by Darkseid. But the scenes with their vows was handled really well. I really love the dissolving editing that they do. I also like how they fake you out, make you think that Clark bailed on Lois, but then he comes up from behind, holds her hand, and they walk down the aisle together. It's an original twist on the oh-so-common wedding scene in most shows and movies. The thing I was most excited about for this episode, though, was getting to see Michael Rosenbaum reprise his role as Lex Luthor. He hasn't been around since season 7, so it was great to see him again. And the exchanges between Clark and Lex are amazing.
The great men and women of the world have always been defined by their enemies.
It sets up them becoming enemies as we know them in the comics, both touching on their fallen friendship and their future together.
We have a destiny together, Clark. Only on different sides.
I'm sorry I couldn't save you, Lex.
Lionel Luthor and Tess Mercer, both characters that were created for the show, get a finish to their character arcs in a very fulfilling way. Lionel dies so that Lex can return, and Tess dies protecting Clark's secret. We see how far Tess has come as a character, and see how loyal she is to Clark after everything they've been through. Clark finally flies, the thing that the creators promised Warner Brothers and DC that they wouldn't do fully until the end of the show, which they've hinted at a couple times throughout the series. But the best part of the episode is obviously seeing Clark become Superman and putting on the costume. I got so nostalgic when Clark sees all his trials that led him to this point, which is basically just flashes of the entire series. And then both of his fathers present him with the costume. Then Jor-El says a line that sums up the entire series.
But it is your time in Smallville, with Jonathan and Martha Kent and all the people there, that made you a hero, Connor.
All the pieces fall into place. Luthor Corp becomes Lex Corp, and in the final shot, we see Clark on the roof of the Daily Planet, and he does the classic Superman scene, ripping his dress shirt off to reveal the S on his chest. They even got the rights to the Superman theme song that plays in the background, making it even more epic and special. Well, there you have it, my top 10 Smallville episodes. Smallville will always have a place in my heart and will always be one of my favorite shows. I enjoyed the series so much and miss it even today, 6 years after it ended. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and please hit that like button and subscribe.